Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. And we are ready to participate in the first year player draft. It's June 21st, 2043. Been a decent season for the Buffalo Wings. As you can see, we're second place in the National League East here, but 10 games behind the Nationals, who have the best record in baseball. And we're only one game up on the Expos for the final wild card spot. So those are the less positive things that have been happening. We do rank sixth in the power rankings, and if you take a look here at our team statistics, our Pythagorean record suggests we should be 4 games better than we are at this point. We're 6-14 in one-run games, so we've gotten very unlucky there. So feel pretty confident that we will be back in the playoffs for a 16th consecutive year, but there's clearly more work to be done to ensure that that really happens. But right now, the business is to focus on the first year player draft, and we will be picking at 32nd, and then we will have a subsequent pick at 38th, a compensatory pick for the loss of Alexis Mendoza last offseason. Appreciate those of you who have shared some thoughts on what we should do. YME943 and Dralix both identified Joe Allen Jr. as someone to consider, and I do like him. There's a fair amount of guys that I kind of like. Arfini Perkins is a 17-year-old left-handed hitting outfielder. Really love the fact that he's got potential to have 70 home run power and 70 I. The question is he going to be a 180 hitter or a 250 hitter with that type of profile? And whether he's going to strike out 150 or 250 times a year. But I still think with potential 70 home run power and 70 I, he is a guy who, if he develops fully, could hit 40 homers, walk 100 times, which is a pretty valuable asset. Kurt Kelsey is a catcher that I like. A little bit of pop in his bat, some positive personality traits, competent defensively. Josh Hoffman is a potential two-way player, a durable infielder. Looks like he could have a decent bat. Not great defensively, low leadership. But as I mentioned, he is a potential two-way player and looks like he could be a back of the rotation starter or a right-hander out of the bullpen. Somewhat interestingly, for a guy who's almost got a major league fastball at 17 years of age, his outfield arm and his infield arm are both pretty awful. So maybe there's some accuracy issues there, although we think his control is going to be pretty good. So that's a little different. Dave Garner, another guy to think about. Nice potential combo of well above average contact and home run power if he were to completely develop. So those are some of the names that are more interesting to me among the batters. Among the pitchers, the guy that I highlighted at the end of the last episode, David Rizzo, like his high work ethic, like his durability, good stamina, good at holding on runners. Looks like he could be a 3-pitch guy with overall above average stuff movement and control. So it could certainly be a pretty solid pitcher. Don't love that he's only faced a fair level of competition, but he has improved his strikeouts per 9 and his strikeout to walk ratio each of the last 3 seasons in high school. He is a guy who's looking for a bit more money at $6 million, so he could perhaps drop a little bit more, but not sure exactly how much further. Steve Fitch is another guy that I like. Question is whether he'll develop the curve or the changeup to potentially become a starter. Do like the high leadership, work ethic, and intelligence that he comes to the table with. If we were to go with a starting pitcher, our scout actually recommends Jesus Barrios. Looks like he'll have a 3 to 4 pitch arsenal, decent stamina, good at holding runners. Don't love a few of the personality traits here, but is a guy who's a college player out of Philadelphia Biblical, throwing in the mid 90s already, but has faced a poor competition level. And then one last guy among the opportunity set that intrigued me a little more than others was Joe Schote, another pitching prospect, a guy who could have a 3 to 6 pitch arsenal. I think his stuff, movement, and control could all be a little better. Excellent at holding on runners, lefty who's committed to ground. So to me, those are some of the more interesting prospects out there. You may ask about Jeremy Fraga because he's got exceptional control potentially. The issue is, although he's listed as a starter, he's really kind of a one-pitch guy. Now, granted, that one pitch is the knuckleball, so that's always potentially very interesting. And if you could combine it with a changeup, that would be something to think about. I don't see myself taking Fraga here in the first round, even with our supplemental pick. If the knuckleballer is still there in the second round, though, I would definitely think about it. If there's a circumstance where you can get away with just having one pitch and still being a starter, it's being a knuckleballer, and that is what Fraga is. And our scouting director recommends that we go with Dave Garner, the left fielder. I don't love the low leadership and work ethic particularly. He's bad defensively, almost 18 years old. Not all that exciting a prospect to me. I tend to think that a fair amount of the players we talked about are still going to be available when we pick again in 6 picks. And I honestly don't have a real strong view on this one. If we were to go with a pitcher, as I said, Jesus Barrios is who's recommended by our scout, another guy who's looking for relatively big money at $6.5 million. And if we were to go with an outfielder, it's Tim Kuhn, who is the definition of average when you kind of look at him across everything. Left-handed hitter who's durable, but not really that exciting to me. So I do like the suggestion of Joe Allen Jr., really good outfield range, decent speed, decent bunter, and if the contact, gap power, and home run power all develop to the level that you think they could, he's an interesting bat. But I'm going to go with our Fenny Perkins here. That home run and eye combo that he has is pretty attractive to me. As I said, a lot's going to depend on if we can really get the contact up to 45 or 50 with him, and a fair amount is going to depend on whether he can strike out just an obscene amount of times rather than a completely filthily obscene amount of times, which certainly seems plausible. Not in love with any of these guys, but as I said, that power and eye potential that Perkins has does attract me. So we're going to go ahead and draft him, move on to our next pick, and see who is still available. Hoffman, the potential two-way second baseman, still out there. Kelsey, the catcher, still out there. And Joe Allen Jr., the center fielder, still out there. Taking a look at the pitchers that are still available. And Rizzo is still out there with that $6 million price tag. Fitch is still out there. Schote is still out there. And we'll check whether our knuckleballer is still out there. And it looks like he may be gone already. So we had the opportunity in the first round just a few picks ago with the knuckleballer, And looks like he has moved on. The 34th pick. All right, the final pick. Interesting. Barrios, the guy that our scout recommended. And then Fraga, the knuckleballer that we were thinking about. Gone with the next two picks. Would have thought about Fraga here, although I had said the second round before. If he was, as I mentioned, I'm just not in love with a lot of these guys, so maybe I should have picked him number 32 overall. Always fun to have a knuckleballer, and his knuckleball is already very good, so may regret not picking him up, because that could have made things interesting going forward with a bit of a unique player. But it is what it is. We've made our decision, and we will move on. Perkins looking for a slot there, so that's easy enough to offer to him. Continuing on with the draft and our supplemental pick, and I think that I am going to follow the wisdom of Wyme943 and Dralix. Joe Allen Jr. still there with the 38th pick, a guy who's not too far away from hopefully being able to help at the major league level. That outfield range is very helpful. Don't love that sometimes he'll make an incredible play to track the ball down and then not be able to hold on to it, but those balls would still be likely falling in for doubles and triples with most other outfielders anyways. So I think he's an interesting player. Another left-handed hitter, gives us a couple young outfielders to perhaps try to build around in the first round of this year's draft. Moving on to our second round pick, and Kelsey is still available, the young catcher. That's certainly going to be an interesting prospect as far as I'm concerned. The potential two-way player, second baseman, is gone now. Taking a look at the pitchers who are available, and Steve Fitch is still around. He's a guy that we've been kind of intrigued by, and Joe Schote is as well. Question whether any of these guys will still be around in the next round of the draft. I do love with Fitch the high leadership, work ethic, and intelligence, the triumvirate of the three personality traits I care about the most. The concern with him is if neither the curve nor the change develop, he's really likely a high volume reliever, which pushes me a little towards Schote, who, as we talked about, could have a 3 to 6 pitch arsenal when all is said and done. Definitely intrigued by both of these players. Schote looking for slot. Fitch also looking for slot. And going back to the batters, Kelsey looking for even less than slot. And I've made my decision with what I'm going to do here in the second round, but for the fun of it, we'll see what our scouting director recommends. He recommends the catcher, Kirk Kelsey, who I definitely have been intrigued by. If we were to go with a pitcher, he recommends Steve Fitch. And the selection is going to be Steve Fitch. With that high work ethic, the good coaching we have, the big investment we have in player development, feel pretty confident that that curve will develop and at least leave him with 3 pitches. Now, granted, that sinker may only be an average pitch, so getting the fastball and the curve to be well above average, which we think they could be, is going to be important. But after grabbing a couple of outfielders in the first round, like to kind of mix pitcher in the second round, although it does look like he's said he was looking for slot, but his bonus demand is actually well over slot. And I have looked a little bit at these relievers who we talked about at the end of last episode. None of them are intriguing enough to me that I am going to take them right here. Schote would be the other option. Has potential for a very versatile arsenal. But I do think that ultimately the strong coaching we have, the big investment in player development, coupled with the excellent personality that Fitch has, hopefully will maximize his chance at success. So we're going to go ahead and bring him on board, meet his bonus demand, and see who's around in the third round. Still a couple of those relievers that our scout thinks are very high end. Looks like Schote is gone at this point. Turning to the batters who are available, Kelsey and Harris are both still there. Harris is, intriguing to me at this point too, given the positive personality traits. But the ability to potentially bring on a catcher with a decent glove and potentially a useful bat with some positive personality traits in the third round is pretty attractive to me. So we are going to go with Kelsey here. I do like a couple of these outfielders, May and Sandoval. We'll see if maybe one of them lingers to our next draft spot. But we'll pick Kelsey here in the third. And moving on to the fourth, looks like one of the center fielders is gone. But Jenko Harris, who is starting to be pretty decent value as a fourth rounder, good personality traits, and a potentially interesting bat for an infielder, although he's more of a corner infielder or a corner outfielder than anything else. Still out there. And Sandoval, one of the center fielders that I liked a little bit, durable, looks like a pretty well-balanced bat. If it fully develops, he is going to strike out a wacky amount of times, which isn't optimal, but does have the high work ethic that we like to see. Take a look at the pitchers who are available at this point too. Still a couple of the relievers. If we were to go with a starting pitcher, the recommendation would be David Salgado, who's really a reliever. And here in the fourth round, I think we're going to go with Jenko Harris. As I mentioned, well-balanced bat, but a bat that if it fully develops, even with the strikeouts, will be pretty useful at the major league level, with well above average home run power and above average eye potentially. Some positive personality traits there too. He's slow and he's very average defensively, but for a fourth rounder, beggars can't be choosers. Move on to the fifth. Scouting director recommends the first baseman, Chris Lewis. He is very uninspiring as far as I'm concerned. Sandoval still out there. Unless there's a pitcher that I have had my eye on, and I'm not all that thrilled with the two relievers, Augiard and Russell. Augiard is a pretty generic right-handed reliever, and Russell, like him a little bit more, and he's a lefty, but he's not all that exciting to me. Ignacio Cabrera has that really good movement and really good control, which is kind of intriguing. Just don't know if his stuff is going to be good enough as an 18-year-old who's barely breaking 90 on the radar gun. And if we were to go with an outfielder, our scout recommends Zachary Zambrano. He is not very interesting at all to me. So I think in the fifth round here, we're going to go with David Sandoval. Again, a pretty well-balanced bat, going to strike out a lot, does have high work ethic. for a fifth rounder, you can at least envision a scenario where if everything goes well, where he's a useful major league player. And if you can pick up somebody like that in the fifth round, it's probably not a bad decision in my view. So we've made the big moves. If we do anything else interesting over the next 15 rounds, I'll be sure to let you know. Just an interesting to note here in the 12th round, interesting thing to note, Zachary Zambrano, you may remember, our scout recommended back in the 4th or 5th round, and we were pretty unimpressed by, is still sitting here in the 12th round, and he remains the recommendation for our scout 7 or 8 rounds after he first suggested we pick him. So don't always trust your scouts. 19th round, and Zachary Zambrano is still being recommended every few rounds by our scout. I might have to fire my scout just for this. And the draft is now over. We've made offers to all 6 of the players that we picked in the first 5 rounds, and with some of them being a little over slot, you can see we have very little money potentially available at this point. Clearly, we could cut scouting and player development a bit over the next 6 to 7 weeks as we get closer to the trade deadline, if there's somebody that we'd like to add. But right now, if we don't decide to add anybody, we'll just kind of be right about where we need to be as far as the money. Although, to be fair, when we get to September roster expansion, we'll need a little more money anyways. With the draft out of the way, the goal is to hopefully finish the month of June well. And over these next few weeks, what we'll really be following is the living legend DeShawn Seifu, recently turned 39 years old, and he is 13 hits away from 3,000. So we will be following Seifu's quest to reach 3,000 career hits near the end of his career. Unlikely that he's going to lead the league in steals for a 16th consecutive year this year, but hopefully he will be a member of a Buffalo Wings playoff team for a 16th consecutive season when all is said and done in October. And we've been playing very well since the off day after the draft with 4 consecutive wins. We've already gotten everybody signed except for our first round pick, Arfini Perkins. So feeling good about that. One other thing we are also feeling good about, Mitch Houlihan ready to come back off of the injury list, so that's a positive for us. And importantly, Luis Palencia, only 1 week left. The pitcher suffered a ruptured UCL almost exactly a year ago. It was unclear in the early stages of his injury whether he would be pitching at all this year. We started thinking we might get him back late in the year to do a rehab assignment in AAA. And now with the fact that we could have him back in early July, it's very conceivable that he could be pitching for us in the majors this year when all is said and done. Big question is exactly what he's going to look like coming off of that injury. He was already fragile in terms of his injury proneness before then, but he does have a lot of personality traits that are positive and a pretty good profile that was pretty successful in stints in AAA Albany, both in 2041 and 2042. So interested in seeing what he can do for us after he does do a little rehab work and hopefully get back in the mix to be a member of our pitching staff. And for those who are wondering, Seifu's picked up 4 more hits over the past 5 games or so, and now stands at 9 hits away from 3,000. And the Wings finished up that good week with Luis Comadran being named the National League Player of the Week. All he did was hit .583 with 3 homers, 6 ribbies, and 7 runs scored. He has been one of our premier offensive players this season. Very valuable guy for us since we picked him up about 3 years ago from the Giants organization. And as the calendar turns to July, we're only a few games away from the midpoint of the season, and Jim Lance, the excellent young pitcher, was named the National League Pitcher of the Month for June. 4-1 record with a 1.23 ERA and 32 strikeouts for the 25-year-old. When all was said and done, the month of June was a very good one for Buffalo. 17-10 record at 44-34. We're still 5 behind our Pythagorean record, so we've been putting up a ton of runs lately, up to 5th in the National League in runs scored and 1st in the National League in runs allowed. So overall, the statistics that we're putting up this year are pretty similar to what we've seen from this team over much of the last decade. And as the month of July begins, DeShawn Seifu 5 hits away from 3,000, so he very well could hit that total in the next week. Certainly would expect that Seifu will be a member of the 3,000 hit club by the time the All-Star game happens in a little less than 2 weeks. And while we've been focused on the milestone of DeShawn Seifu reaching 3,000 hits, Daniel Rojas just joined the 2,000 hit club. Picked him up as a free agent 2.5 years ago, and he's been a very productive player for us over those first 2.5 seasons with us, hitting .293 this year, 12 homers, 44 ribbies, and a 142 WRC+. And as we mentioned, he is now a member of the 2,000 hit club. Our friend, Mr. Seifu, as we sit here 80 games into the season, now stands with 2,997 hits. So just 3 away. Any day, he is likely to join the 3,000 hit club. And Seifu did join the 3,000 hit club in fine fashion as part of a 14-4 victory in the 81st game of the year, which brings us to the midway point of the season. A big game by Seifu, 3 for 6, 3 runs scored, and a ribby. And he also stole 2 bases to go to 18 on the year. So a vintage DeShawn Seifu day puts him in the 3,000 hit club. Very good to see that he has finally reached that benchmark. And Seifu having a solid year for us, 271 average, 18 of 22 on the base paths, as we talked about, unlikely to lead the National League for a 16th consecutive year in steals, but with 16 doubles and 3 triples in addition to the 3,000 hits, it's probably a good time to take a look and just see the very unique career that Mr. Seifu has built over these past closing in on 2 decades as a member of the Buffalo Wings organization, because he has done some things offensively that we have not seen in a long time. And with the 3,000 hits, Seifu, of course, tied with Roberto Clemente for 34th all-time. Will likely be passing the likes of K-Line, Boggs, Palmeiro, Lou Brock, Rod Carew, Ricky Henderson, and Craig Biggio before the end of this season, in all probability. Outside chance he could even get past Ichiro. But interesting that he'll have more hits likely than Ricky Henderson by the time this season is over. We've talked a lot about the steals, and Seifu easily second all-time. Still at this point, he's 167 steals behind tying Ricky Henderson with only 18 midway through this season. And the fact he's 39 years old, unlikely that Seifu will reach Henderson in that mark. Another area where he is pretty high on the career list is runs scored. And Seifu at this point 33rd overall with 1,674 runs scored. Mickey Mantle, Bid McPhee, Billy Hamilton, and Michael Harris II, the next players on the list for Seifu there. And the doubles and the triples are where he's really done some things that we haven't seen in quite a long time. On the all-time doubles list, DeShawn Seifu now ranks 7th with 671. Will likely be passing Curtis Mead very shortly. Has a chance to pass Pujols to get into the top 5. And it's conceivable, if he plays another year after this one, that Seifu could join the 700 double club with just Tris Speaker, Pete Rose, Stan Musial, and Ty Cobb. So some pretty lofty company there. Triples, we're really seeing something from Seifu that we haven't seen before. You can see Seifu now ranks 11th all-time, tied with Bid McPhee with 188 career triples. And there is nobody from the post-World War II era who is ahead of DeShawn Seifu. Paul Wainer, who played until 1944, is one of a handful, well, not a handful, 2 handfuls of players ahead of Seifu in triples at this point. Most of them played in the 19th century, early 20th century dead ball era when it was a very different game. Seifu with 188, ahead of Stan Musial, 4 names that would be a little more familiar to today's viewers. Ahead of Roberto Clemente, who ranks 25th overall. And then as far as players who I actually was able to see play, Seifu ahead of Willie Wilson with 147 triples, which is the highest figure of any player since Clemente. So although I was alive at the same time as Roberto Clemente, I did not actually get to see him play. So Seifu, in terms of the number of triples he's put together in his career, is in a very illustrious company, and he's doing something that here in 2043, we really haven't seen anyone with this many triples in a century, literally, at this point. So with some interesting statistics on Seifu discussed, we'll now turn our attention back to the team. And we have been playing very well of late, 8-2 in our last 10. We've closed the gap on the Nationals to just 6 games in the National League East. And you can see we are now up 3 on the final wild card spot in the National League. So made some good progress over the last several weeks. Mike Whitehead, the young infielder, still 3rd in the National League with a .332 batting average. Nobody among the top 3 in the league among our pitchers, but it has still been a very effective pitching staff, as we talked about not that long ago when we visited our team statistics. And as we do our annual midseason review, check in on where the team is at this point, and 46-35 record, 5 behind Pythagorean expectations. So we should win over 90, but we're expected to win over 100. 4th in the National League in runs scored. You can see we're in the first, the top handful of rankings in just about all offensive categories. One clear exception being home runs, where we're 10th, and strikeouts, where we're 13th. Pitching-wise, number one in the National League in runs allowed, second best starters ERA, fifth best bullpen ERA, similar to our batting in the top handful of most pitching categories in the National League. Also a pretty good defensive team and a pretty good stealing team as far as base running. Our base running itself is not ranked quite as highly. Turning to our pitching staff, we thought with the departure of Mendoza, who was responsible for that second supplemental pick that we used on the college center fielder, and moving Auclair into the stopper role, we thought the rotation with Lott and Manelli joining the team this year could be a question mark. And as it has been for most of the last decade, the starting rotation still very good. Barajas only 5-5, but a 3.61 ERA, striking out more than a batter per inning. Jim Lance, we just talked about, 88 strikeouts in the year, 7-4 record with a sub-3 ERA. Eric Barbarito somehow has a losing record while striking out more than a batter per inning, putting up a 3.70 ERA. Chris Lott, 6-6 with a 3.46 ERA, and Simeon Manelli, 6-1 with a 2.90 ERA. So the starters have gone out there every fifth day throughout the season and done really well. Looks like we must still be looking at OSA ratings rather than our head scout ratings, so we will switch those. The bullpen, the two big guys are the two most disappointing guys in a way so far. Closer Joe Scott, by far having the worst year of his career, 4.25 ERA over 29 2/3 innings, has struck out 41 batters, but the BABIP is 3.52. Hopefully that will normalize going forward. Only 17 saves in the first half of the season for Scott. And Auclair has not been as effective as we would have expected in that stopper role. The issue is we're really happy with everyone in the rotation, so there's no reason to put him back in the rotation. But we have gotten high volume from Auclair with 70 innings pitched over the first half of the season, over 47 games. But he's given up a lot more home runs working out of the bullpen than he did as a starter, with 14 home runs allowed in those 70 at-bats. Hopefully that will change. You can see his SIERA is 2.01. His whip is still reasonable. Hopefully the second half of the season will be better for Auclair. Nate Ruckel, our former stopper, has done well in a setup role, 2.86 ERA and more than a strikeout per inning. David Rivera, 3.26 ERA, and he is striking out well over a batter per inning. Pat Cheek and Sean Drawn, as well as David Espinoza, also doing well. Robbie Farrell is a guy whose spot could be in jeopardy. The ERA is close to 5, and he does still have option years left. So if and when Palencia is ready to come up, Farrell's roster spot could certainly be in jeopardy. And we've also got some pretty good guys in AAA who could be pushing on him as well. So don't feel like there's a lot we really need to do with the pitching as we approach the trade deadline. Pretty happy with how things have gone thus far. Turning now to our everyday players after 81 games of this season. Houlihan just got back from the injured list, as we talked about, hitting just 209 and 86 at-bats this year. Still like him defensively, and he is still a career 300 hitter, so would expect a better second half than his first half, and hopefully he'll be healthy for the playoffs. Juan Ramirez, the young catcher, has had the opportunity to play more often with the injury to Houlihan, hitting just 226 in 177 at-bats, does have 10 doubles, 4 triples, and 25 ribbies, 72 WRC plus on the year, but still an above replacement level player, thanks probably in large part to his very good defensive catcher ability. Like that platoon right now, but would certainly love Ramirez to really ultimately put a stranglehold on this position going forward. We talked about first baseman Daniel Rojas in the third year of that 4-year, $120 million deal he signed with us. .295 average, 12 homers, 45 ribbies, 144 WRC plus, 2.5 WAR on the year. He is doing his job. Alejandro Contreras, the young second baseman, hitting just 270 at-bats for us. He spent some time injured at the beginning of the year and then a pretty long stint in AAA since we were happy with our major league roster, but he is now back in the majors for us, not hitting all that much at this point. He is what he is. He's competent defensively. He should be competent offensively, but he's certainly not a superstar. Mike Whitehead, though, is putting up superstar-type numbers despite a batting profile that doesn't look particularly special, hitting .332 this year, as we talked, 119 WRC+. Unfortunately, would expect some regression towards the mean from Whitehead going forward, and in his case, that will likely not be positive in terms of his statistics. Ramiro Medina, the young third baseman we picked up in a trade this past offseason, batting average only .245, but has been productive with the hits that he does have. 14 doubles, 11 homers, 12 stolen bases, all adds up to a 97 WRC+. He has been a solid third baseman for us this year at 24 years of age. Seifu, who of course was our longtime second baseman and then has been our third baseman for the last several years, is now primarily a DH. We've talked about him very extensively recently. .271 average, 18 steals, 16 doubles, a bit below average in terms of his WRC+. He could be nearing the end. You can see his range has even dipped since the start of the season, and he's basically unplayable as an infielder at this point, except for a first baseman. But he is a captain. He is still fleet on the base paths, and he can still knock a few extra base hits around with those 16 doubles and 3 triples this year. The Iron Man could be in his final season in Buffalo, could be in his final season in the majors, and he's going to continue to be our leadoff man for the time being. Final infielder, shortstop Jim Andrews, hitting .284 for us with 9 homers. Some good personality traits, good defensively, pretty average offensive profile, but he's put up a 119 WRC+ for us this year. As we talked about with Whitehead, would expect some negative reversion to the mean from Andrews. So hopefully we'll get a little more offense from Mr. Contreras going forward to help offset that. So as we think about our catchers, I like our catchers. As we think about our infielders, fine with Rojas at first base. And I honestly don't mind mixing and matching between Contreras, Whitehead, Medina, Andrews, and Seifu if necessary at second, third, and short. If there was a Gold Glove / Silver Slugger type infielder around, that would be an obvious type of player who could help us. With very limited funds to bring on a contract, it could get challenging to bring on a player like that. And more importantly, as we look at the trading block here, does not really appear that there is a Gold Glove / Silver Slugger type quality middle infielder available. Have to go all the way down to Billy Jones, who's injured on the list with bicep tendonitis, to find the first middle infielder listed. And although he is solid defensively and good in the clubhouse, his bat doesn't look particularly special even compared to the players that we already have on our team. Bobby Mitchell and Steve Moriarty also out there. Moriarty, again, the batting profile isn't all that different than the guys we already have. The defensive profile probably not much better. So I don't know that there's necessarily an obvious answer for us in terms of a middle infielder who's going to be a real difference maker. Jesus Rivera, decent bat, pretty mediocre glove. So if we're going to make a big difference in our infield, it's probably going to be a monster trade for someone who's not even on the trade block. Don't know that we really can pull something like that off. We are, and I'll mention this before we get to the outfielders, we're not too far away from perhaps being able to see last year's first round draft pick, Danny Ferguson. We're going to promote him today to AAA. He's day-to-day with knee tendonitis at this point, but he's hit .304 with 24 homers and 60 ribbies, a 162 WRC plus in AAA at Utica. You may ask why we've taken so long to promote him to AAA. It's because he's got an outstanding relationship with the hitting coach in AA, who's a very talented hitting coach. His relationship with the AAA hitting coach is not going to be quite as good, so figured we'd give him a little bit extra time with the guy who's working well with him. Ferguson, a pretty versatile potential infielder, and another guy with a solid potential batting profile. He is likely, if that eye continues to improve, to draw a lot more walks than the other middle infielders that we have. So if we're unable to do something as far as trading for a big middle infielder, would expect that Ferguson will be put on the 40-man roster before the end of August, and after the next likely close to 2 months in AAA at Albany, will likely be on the short list for promotion to the majors in September. And depending on what things look like, he could certainly be in the mix to be on a playoff roster in October. So if we're unable to make a trade, Ferguson not too far away. Don't think he's necessarily a huge difference maker compared to the players that we have right now, but he does give us some more flexibility and versatility with the skill set that he brings. And with the discussion of the infielders done, we'll talk about the outfielders before we finish up the episode and start thinking about the last close to 4 weeks before the trade deadline. Josh Porter back into more of a role where he's only playing against left-handers or playing primarily against left-handers this year. And once again, a disappointing season. 209 average, 6 homers and 20 ribbies, 90 WRC plus. Porter is almost 30 years old at this point. He was born September 11th, 2013. Until the last couple of years, he was consistently a well above average offensive player, whether he was an everyday player or someone who was being used a little more judiciously. These last couple seasons, though, in over 600 at-bats, he's been a below-average offensive player. Just seems to be one of these guys who doesn't quite live up to what you think his batting ratings are, particularly when you put those batting ratings together with a pretty speedy profile. He doesn't have a triple this season, despite 70 gap power and 65 speed. Does have 13 doubles and 148 at-bats, so that has been productive. But a guy who, on paper, seems to look better than he actually performs. Juan Romero, who opted into that qualifying offer that we gave him this past off season. The batting average has dipped to 246, only 8 homers and 41 ribbies, barely an above average offensive player. In 4 seasons with Buffalo, he's led the team in ribbies every year and led the team in homers every season except last year. Very unlikely that he'll lead the team in homers or ribbies this year. Could be his final year with us. Unfortunately, he and Seifu are our only captains on the major league team right now, so it would hurt a little bit to lose both of those gentlemen this offseason. But we're a long way from needing to make those decisions. But Romero has certainly been disappointing and probably has not earned an extension. Hopefully his demands have come down a bit. They really haven't. He's been looking for 8 years, a little under $20 million a year all season. So the lack of production this season compared to what he's done in the past has not dropped his price at all. Center fielder Ishmael Velasco having another good solid year for us. 289 average, 10 home runs, 15 stolen bases, 116 WRC plus. We never expected him to repeat the 147 WRC plus that he put together when he was Rookie of the Year, as well as World Series MVP in 2041. Well, I can't say that we never expected him to repeat it, but we certainly didn't expect him to consistently be at that level. But he's been a solid above average offensive player for the last 2 seasons now. Good outfield range. He's durable. He can play every day, and the fans love him. So still happy that we have him signed to the longest contract on the team at this point. But we've still got team options to potentially get out of that when the money gets higher, and he's in his 30s if need be. Edgar Canales, a left-handed hitter off the bench, hitting .258 with 4 doubles, 4 homers, and 19 ribbies and 89 at-bats. Been a league average type player for us as a left-handed pinch hitter off of the bench. And certainly last but not least, Luis Comaduran, .292 average, 17 homers, 50 ribbies, 146 WRC plus, having another big-time offensive season, and is a very important part of our offense. So feel like we could certainly improve the outfield on the margin. Probably not going to mess with Comaduran in right or Velasco in center. But if there was a way to upgrade Porter and or Romero in left field, would certainly investigate something like that. I don't know that there's an obvious solution on the trade block. In fact, I'm pretty confident there is not an obvious solution on the trade block, because I've looked at the trade block, and Dylan Bond, 34 years old, good power, not an incredible eye. Our old buddy Arturo Flores, Mike Markell, who we thought about this past offseason, just don't see a big-time difference maker there. We still do have Bobby Bolig in AAA if we wanted to bring him up to be another left-handed bat for us. So there are options out there. Just don't know that there's a true difference-making type of option that's really going to materially improve our offense. And with the fact that we've been playing a bit better of late, the incentive to make a rash decision to improve our offense is a little less than it may have been a few weeks ago. So feeling pretty comfortable with where the team sits here on July 4th, 2043. As I mentioned, 6 games out in the division, 3 up on the final wild card. So we seem to be in a pretty good position to hopefully earn our 16th consecutive playoff berth and extend our all-time record in that category. But we'll find out what, if anything, we do in the trade market in our next episode. Until then, congratulations to Rojas on his 2,000th hit. Congratulations to DeShawn Seifu on his 3,000th hit. And until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.